Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Real Birding Podcast, the show where we crack open the world of birding and talk about our own birding adventures. I'm Will Keller, coming to you from Charlotte, North Carolina.
And I'm Caleb Putnam in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
We're going to try something a little bit new this week. We are going to break down 5 birding misconceptions, mistakes that beginning birders make, that if you can learn these, it will level you up in your birding. But before we do, we are going to get into our bird quiz of the week. Last week, we played for you the song of a northern cardinal, and Kyle Irwin got that right. Good job, Kyle. I think that's the second time you've gotten this correct, so good stuff.
We got some repeat customers here in these bird quizzes. Shout out, Kyle. Good work.
Yeah, more people need to start participating. Come on, drop your guesses in the comments.
Don't be shy, people. Jump in.
This week, instead of playing for you the song of a North American bird, we're going to show you the nest of a North American bird that a listener sent in. So if you're listening along and not watching along, we'll just give you a description. So we have a post, like a sort of, what is it, a 6x6 post in the ground that's rotten out through the middle.
And this is in Michigan. Let's be clear. Now, this is in Michigan, West Michigan, this time of year in a forested kind of edge situation.
That's right. So as you get closer, you peer down into this little cavity and you notice a nest with 6 very small eggs that are white with brown speckling.
Shout out to Megan Dofel for donating and allowing the use of her excellent photos here. The adult bird just happened to be present in the vicinity of the nest. We probably would have known what it was anyway, but I'll just give you the final hint that the adult bird was in the area of this nest. So if you think you know what it is, put it in the comments of whatever platform you're on, and you may hear your name next week.
All right. Without further ado, let's get into it. Caleb, I'm back in North Carolina. It's 90 degrees today, and I'm missing Michigan a little bit for that reason.
That actually is not that dissimilar from what we had. It was literally 89 degrees yesterday, and like for me, is highly miserable. I don't know about these Southerners may disagree with me on this, but way too hot for this early in the year.
It's just hard to have fun when it's that hot, but it's not hard to have fun if it's that hot and there's birds tripping off the trees, which I went to my local park today and there's a Canada warbler hanging out. There had been a Wilson's warbler reported, both of which are very rare locally. I think there's only a handful that get reported each year in the county.
Makes sense. Yeah, they're two of the ones that come through Texas and don't cross the Gulf, right? So to get to North Carolina, they kind of have to loop all the way across to the east there. So
that's right. Yeah, and in the mountains, these birds are a lot more common, but we're down in the Piedmont region, which is about 60 miles from the nearest sort of like real mountainous areas. So
gotcha.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to get a shot at those birds. You were telling me that you had a pretty, what'd you call it, a frustrating birding experience yesterday and today?
So yeah, dude, 2 days ago, middle of the day, I get this checklist that pops up, and this is in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and kind of the northeast side of town, and it's a fish crow. So the guy has photos of it, and it was sitting there calling. This is the actual recording. So no doubt on the identification, and this is the first time ever in our county that we've had this. We talked about the species a little bit before, and they have this peculiar habit of coming right up the Lake Michigan shore, but they really don't come inland. There's just been a couple of them that came 5 or 10 miles here. So We weren't really expecting it to come this far inland. But there's this really cool thing, Will. Check this out. When they do come inland, look what they do. They jump in on the big giant rivers and they go right up the rivers. And that's exactly what happened here. This bird is right on the Grand River. And so anyway, we shot over there, and I think we got there 3 hours after it was last seen, and the bird just wasn't present. We knew exactly where he had seen it. He told us. And so I went on a little adventure this morning and floated from basically upriver and then went down like this with a buddy of mine, Jim. And we thought maybe we'd get it flying up and down the river corridor. And we didn't get lucky. It's not a surprise. You don't want to be chasing a bird like fish crow in the month of May. Not the month to be doing it, because they are just on the move.
Well, they're trying to find new places to potentially set up territories, new colonies. That's exactly what they did 20 years ago when they first came into southern Michigan.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it was this colony down here that got big first. And then, it probably took 10 years before they even spread to here. And then now that there's more and more source of birds coming out from here, they're just popping up. I mean, look at all these orange pins. These are orange means within the last 30 days. And it's very clear that the species is expanding. And I would have to say to you, even though we missed this bird, I know we're going to get it again in the county. It's just a matter of time. And they'll probably be nesting in 10 or 15 years, something like that.
Yeah, it's reaching a critical mass where now just more and more records are popping up every year. And the thing I wonder about with fish crow, because it's such a recent sort of addition to the avifauna in the area, and the population is so small, you got to think that like if we had a really harsh winter one year, it could wipe out a population or force them to retreat back south and say we're never doing that again.
Because American crow is very hardy. They don't have that issue. But what I don't know is how much can fish crow take? There is definitely a difference. You and I both know this from working down by Indianapolis and then working up in central Michigan. It is much harsher here than it is in Indianapolis in midwinter. There's just no way around it. We get way more really cold temperatures. So if fish crow has a limitation like that, it's definitely going to find it in Michigan. And time will tell.
Yeah.
The plot thickens, man. You just never know in birding what's going to happen. It's a never-ending mystery and plot line to follow along with,
Yeah. And there's too many variables to be able to predict it with any level of confidence. It's really cool.
Absolutely. Warblers too, man. We had 3 or 4 straight nights of really, really good radar reflectivity. So there was tons of migrants around. I was able to get out, not as much as, it's never quite as much as I want, but I got out quite a bit and was able to sample it. I've gotten everything except for bay-breasted, Canada, and Connecticut. All the rest of actually no, golden wing. I need golden wing as well. So those 4 I haven't gotten yet, and I'm getting a little bit worried about golden wing because they're not a late one. They're like a mid-May thing. So I probably need to get that soon, or I'm going to be heading to the breeding grounds if I want it. So are you missing any of them?
Oh, I'm missing a good amount, dude, especially down here. So many of the warblers are kind of gettable, but not really. Like Wilson's, I might not get Wilson's if I don't get lucky in the next few days. Morning warbler is going to be really tough around here. A lot of these birds tend to be a lot more common down here in the fall just because the geography works out that way. It's easier to come south through the Piedmont than it is to go north through the Piedmont because of just the shape of the continent that we live on.
That's a very interesting thought. In fact, another one that I want to mention, because I have friends in Florida and South Carolina, in addition to you in North Carolina, is Connecticut warbler. I'm going to pull this map up. So I have to tell you, Will, I learned quite a bit after talking with my friends in Florida and South Carolina, is that in the springtime, Connecticut warbler, which is, by the way, it's wintering as far as like Bolivia apparently is the big one. This thing goes way south, like south of the proper Amazon even. And they're wintering Amazon as well, but there's nobody there to detect them. So anyway, when they come back in the springtime here, I'm going to filter this by spring. They come over the Caribbean. So not only are they not afraid to go over the open water, they are very rare to the west of the Gulf. Texas hardly gets them. But where they do get them is on the east coast of Florida in mid-May, because these birds are crossing the water, and apparently you can walk like these mangrove thickets, and there'll be like a 2-track with a mangrove thicket, and there's a Connecticut warbler on the beach, and no other species of warblers, of migrant warblers, present. Like, it's such a different dynamic down there. So my question for you is, are you too far north, or are you going to be taking part in this like Connecticut party here? Because they should be coming through. It looks like there aren't that many pins.
Yeah, they're proper rarities here, just like kind of maybe even rarer here than other places. And another problem is the habitat here is just so bad. And I don't want to sound too negative on the show, but
is what it is, right?
I will be targeting Connecticut warbler this weekend. I think we're kind of at the peak opportunity to get one. And there's lots of birders around, and there are lots of like little, kind of cruddy little thickets around for them to spend a day or two in. So fingers crossed I'll get one this weekend.
Yeah, man. Good luck. I get out before 8 a.m. because I tell you, they just quit singing early in the morning. My favorite way to find Connecticut, for all you beginner intermediate level birders, that is a hard species to find. And it took me, I don't even know, 15 years before I got my lifers after I'd already been involved. But you want to get out at dawn in in Michigan, it's like May 22nd through June 2nd, really late at the very, like a lot of the stuff's already through, and the male Connecticut's are just getting in. Down where you are, I'm sure it's probably a week in front of that.
Yeah.
And just be out riding bikes down the trail, go as many miles as you can before 9 a.m. Just listening in the habitat, knowing the song, and your odds are better than you think. They're hard, but they are definitely around.
Yes. Speaking of tips for beginners and intermediate level birders, why don't we get into our topic of the day?
Let's do it. Will, as a reviewer, and also more broadly, as somebody who grew up from age 6 learning how to bird by myself, there is a series of mistakes that you have to make, and you have to make all of those mistakes to build up to the point where you are no longer making all of the normal mistakes. And that's how I view the process of birding. And so I thought what we would do today, be really fun, is take 5 examples of ones, maybe in the beginner to intermediate level, that if we can help put somebody up to that next level, will just up their game and up your confidence. And so let's get right into it here. I'd like to start with what I call 3 warblers with a small W. So if you actually think about it, our warblers with the capital W really don't warble. It's such a misnomer. None of that. They do all these other kind of sounds, but they don't warble. But 3 species that do warble here are American robin, rose-breasted grosbeak, and scarlet tanager. And these are so easy to confuse at first, but once you have the tips, they're actually pretty straightforward.
That's right. So I've got these pulled up here. So we're just going to talk about these birds and play these songs, and we're going to talk you through how we make these IDs in the field. And we're going to start with American robin, because that is like the default. If you don't think you know what it sounds like, I promise you do, because it is just constantly making the following song. It is just a classic, clear-throated, warble, sing-songy, up, down, kind of lazily singing along.
Cheery up, cheerio, cheery up, cheerio. Medium speed, no obvious buzziness or hoarseness, just kind of nice, relatively clean notes, not super high pitched, just kind of average.
Yep. Now we're going to go to rose-breasted grosbeak. This is another one. If you don't know this bird, you should, because it is absolutely gorgeous. But they're kind of treetop birds, so you might not see them all the time. But they sing a lot, and they sound very similar to robins. Let's have a listen. So the way I learned how to identify rose-breasted grosbeak is they sound like a robin that got voice lessons. It's just a little bit clearer, a little bit more of a whistle than a warble. We'll listen one more time.
Will, the way that I experience this species is when I first hear it start singing, I think to myself, could this be a robin? But then it gets going so fast, and it's a little bit clearer. There's a little bit less burriness. It's like clearer notes. It sounds like a robin who is on amphetamines. That's the best I've got. And once it gets into the middle of it and you see it just skyrocketing off, you're like, that is not a robin. That is totally a rose-breasted grosbeak.
That's exactly right.
You'll get the little hint, that little squeak note, the little squeak toy note, the peak. If you hear that amongst your song, that's another clue that you've got the grosbeak, not the robin.
Yeah, I don't have it pulled up right now, but I can tell you it sounds almost exactly like a basketball shoe on a gym floor. That little squeak that you hear when you're watching March Madness is what these birds sound like with their little call note. All right, on to the third classic sort of pitfall in this group. The scarlet tanager, another absolute stunning bird.
Look at that. What a bird.
And it is the opposite of a rose-breasted grosbeak as it relates to American robin, which is sort of our baseline in this group. Let's listen. Can you just hear how it's harsh and burry? And even though it's kind of doing the same pattern as the other two, this will stand out, and it'll even stand out at really long distances. You would think that you would lose that sort of quality because it's such a slight difference, but over a long distance, it actually is still pretty noticeable.
The thing that gets me with scarlet tanager is it is much more similar to the robin than the grosbeak is, and you think for a second maybe it is a robin again, and then it's got a sore throat. It just has too sore of a throat. It's too burry, and it usually keeps that burriness right through the song. which the other two, if they added any of it, it's not going to last the whole time. But Scarlet Tanager holds the burriness right through that song.
That's right. It's actually a really good point. These species can overlap in their tone a little bit, but it always seems to come right back home to the sort of base levels. So if you out there can think of this as a sort of spectrum of sweetness on the left and burriness on the right, with American Robin right in the middle, that is a really good way to identify these birds.
Love it. And I can tell you from personal experience, the confidence you gain when you take that step from beginner into intermediate and you start getting a handle on these species. Oh, it feels so good. Mm-hmm. And they're actually not that hard.
Okay, on to the next big pitfall and mistakes that are so easy to make for beginners and even more advanced birders. This is genuinely a tough ID. The Cooper's hawk versus the sharp-shinned hawk, and I'll give National Audubon Society credit for this photo right here, but it is so good at demonstrating both how similar these birds can look and how you might be able to tell them apart. Caleb, do you want to dive into this?
Absolutely. And I would dare say this is not beginner or intermediate. This is a truly advanced level identification issue, but it's relevant because people see these in their backyard all the time. You know, sharp-shinned is the more migratory one. Up here, they're not even here in the winter so much. Down south, you're going to have both. But in any event, these are accipiters. They have longer tails than other hawks, like red tails, and they chase birds in the air rather than sitting and diving on mammals. Sharp-shinned is the really small one. So if it's the size of a blue jay, that would be the male sharp-shinned, because the males are smaller than the females in raptors. Cooper's is larger, but it's still not as big as a red tail. And there is no size overlap, but that doesn't help you in the field because you don't have a ruler. The fact that there's no size overlap is really irrelevant unless the bird is in the hand and you can measure it with a ruler. So we have to go to other things. So these two birds are adults, and the sharp-shinned is the one on the left. And if you look carefully, there's a couple things that I really love about this. Let's start on the head and notice how dark the crown is. This kind of slate gray is the same color as the color of the back. And the crown connects into the back with a patch that's just as dark, if that makes sense. Sharp-shinned is hooded. Cooper's hawk is more capped. Also, on the sharp-shinned hawk, the eye is proportionately large. It kind of looks buggy. And on the Cooper's, in proportion to the rest of the bird, it's kind of just a pin. This is not the easiest thing to see, but to me, it gives the sharp-shinned hawk a friendly or not intimidating look. It's almost silly or comic, but then the Cooper's hawk has that scary hawk look about it. It looks kind of mean or scary. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Another thing you can point out is the shape of the heads on these two birds, and if you get a profile view like this, it makes it pretty easy to tell. The sharp-shinned hawk has such a round little head, and the Cooper's hawk has this almost it almost wants to be a crest or something, but they've got this angle from the crown of the head going into the nape, which is just the back of the neck.
And again, a lot of the individual birds that you see are going to be let go. You really should not be identifying at any time. You should not be identifying all of the ones that you see because they're genuinely hard. One last hint we've got to throw in here. Look at the tip of the tail. On that sharp-shinned on the left, you can see that it's kind of square tipped, meaning that the outermost feathers are longer or the same length as the ones from the middle of it. So it kind of chops off perpendicularly. And this is not the case in Cooper's hawk. In Cooper's hawk, the middle tail feathers are longer than the outer ones. And so you get a rounded effect, typically visible even when the tail's closed like this. Not diagnostic, though, because as we all know, feathers can get broken and they molt. So there are times where the shapes of these things can be goofy. But this one that Will just put up it shows it quite well.
This photo is from Hawkwatch International. Full credit to those guys. What I love about this photo, and what I actually think is the best mark for how to tell these birds apart in flight. By the way, these are immature birds compared to the adult ones that have
Very good point.
The sort of red striping on the front. These are mottled down the front. Very similar plumage. The best way to tell these birds apart in the air, some people will tell you it's the shape of the tail. I actually don't like that mark very much. It's really hard to see sometimes. And I hope this doesn't get too advanced, but if you look at these two birds on the left, sharp-shinned hawk on the left, Cooper's hawk on the right, the sharp-shinned hawk, the shape of the wings is more curved, and the wrist, which is what you kind of want to call the elbow, but it's actually the wrist on these birds, The wrist on the sharp-shinned hawk curves forward and is almost right to the same level as the front of the face. Whereas if you look at the Cooper's hawk, it's totally flat.
Cooper's hawk is more of like a flying cross appearance. The wings are kind of skinny and even width, and they're typically held more straight out. But on the sharp-shinned hawk, it's a broader wing in proportion to the full bird, and the wrist is held forward, so it never really gives you a cross kind of appearance to it. But again, guys, these are very advanced things, and it takes thousands and thousands of repetitions to get them. So do not get frustrated with yourself if you're having trouble. There was, Will, I don't know if you heard this, but they actually tested advanced hawk watchers, professional hawk watchers with known identity birds that they had in the hand. They would release a bird that they knew exactly what it was, and then it would fly over the people. They'd tell them, okay, here comes quiz bird number 1. And they were messing up like something like 15 or 20% of these. So even the experts are getting these wrong. I don't quote me on the number, but that was published a while ago, and it was kind of eye-opening. They're really hard.
So the lesson there being, don't be afraid to let some IDs go. You don't have to identify every bird, and if you're reporting them on eBird, you can always say now accipitrine hawk spa species instead of actually identifying them down to the individual species themselves.
Or you can put sharp-shinned / Coopers.
That's right.
That's always a good option. So, Will, let's move to a different example here. I want to talk eagles. This is a common one that you hear just in society in general. Folks will say, well, I saw a golden eagle. It was the biggest eagle I've ever seen, and not realizing that it was actually a young bald eagle. So it gets complicated, right? So let's dive straight into this. So, all right. We're not going to talk about adult bald eagle. There's no issues there, right? Big white head, big white tail, no problem. But the fact is, bald eagles take 4 years, if not 5 in some cases, to get to that plumage. And in the meantime, they do not look like the adult. So I want to start with this bald eagle, which appears to be a full juvenile. And you're going to notice, first of all, that it's mostly blackish or really chocolate brown, quite dark brown. And there's white mottling on the underwing. Well, these get called Goldens because they just don't look like the bald eagle, the classic adult bald eagle. But it isn't. It's a bald eagle. So you'll note that the white is mottled all kind of sparsely across the underwing, and especially in the axillary, the armpit. What we call the axillary is the armpit. If the armpit is white, and then you have mottling of white dispersed throughout in a salt and pepper way, you're looking at a young bald eagle. So here's another example illustrating this quite well. This is not a juvenile. This bird is either 2 or 3 years old. You can see that there is white in the armpit here. There's salt and pepper white across the underwing. And yet it still does not have the fully white head and the fully white tail of bald eagle, but it's still a bald. And a third example here. I really like this one too, because you're looking at the bird nice and perpendicularly. Very classic bald eagle. Also, if you guys want a really advanced hit, this is kind of cool. If you can get a good photo or a really good look, this is very helpful. But if you take the front edge of the wing where it hits the body and the rear edge of the wing where it hits the body, and take that distance and then compare that distance to the distance from the trailing edge of the wing to the corner of the tail, and you'll see that the tail is not as long as the wing width where it meets the body. That's a bald eagle kind of hint, which segues me into golden eagle. Okay, so let's start with the basics. Golden eagle is the only one of the lot between all of these options of ages of balds and goldens that is all dark. Okay, in the young plumages, which we'll get to, it has bold white patches, not salt and pepper, but just bold patches. But as that bird gets to age 3, 4, 5, and beyond, it gets less and less white, and then eventually it's just all dark brown. So that actually, if you see one that's all dark brown without white mottling at all, you're pretty much looking at an adult golden eagle. Now, when they are youngsters, goldens, they start out with 3 white patches, one at the base of the primaries and secondaries in each wing, kind of halfway out the wing in both directions, and symmetrical, and also the base of the tail here. So in a juvenile golden eagle, the base of the entire tail is bright white, and the tip of the tail is black, and it's almost maybe 2/3, 1/3, or even half and half. That is never shown in bald eagle. So 3 patches of white is your juvenile golden. As that golden gets to age 2 and 3, the white starts to get smaller, but it's still there, like this bird. And then when it finally reaches the adult, you're looking at all dark. And one other hint, just to bring the whole thing home, if you use that same wing breadth at the body versus the tail, you'll see that the tail is longer in proportion to the bird in golden eagle, where the tail length is about the same as the front to back length of the wing where it meets the body. So that's a little bit advanced, but it's the point is that you can, it gives you the impression of a longer tailed bird on golden eagle and a shorter tailed bird in bald.
Wow, that was perfect. I didn't have to say anything, unsurprisingly. Do you have any more pulled up, Caleb, or should I go into our last one here?
I do have one more pulled up before you get into your final one. Let's do this. House finch and purple finch, constant source of confusion. Both species are commonly at feeders. The males have red and the females are kind of all brown, and they're quite similar. So let's get into it. This is your adult house finch, and males and females are both red in the head and chest area, and it kind of bleeds a little bit into the back. A couple of things we notice on this species is how uniform it is, and that the red itself is not dipping toward the purple end of the spectrum, but it's a little bit more toward, I would say, maybe the scarlet, if that makes sense. It's a little bit less, it's a colder red and a brighter red, whereas when you get into purple finch, I would say you're looking at more almost of like a dipped in raspberry juice kind of feel to it. And you'll
Magenta, yeah.
Oh yeah, I like that. The whole notion of purple or purpureus, the Latin name, is relevant here, right? It's a little bit toward that side. They also, this is a male purple finch here, and they also will get a little bit more red into the wing coverts and the upper tail and rump area, and even on the tail itself. That's not the biggest thing in house finch. Also, with the adult purple finch, you notice that it's got this black mask behind the eye that has a nice distinct paler thing above it and below it. And I'll go back to the house finch here. These guys are a bit more uniform, both in the adult and the youngsters, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Purple finch typically is also the rarer or more special one, unless you're living way up in the north, and then it flips. The folks way up north will have purple, but not as many house finches. So let's do the juveniles. So this is your house finch. These are light brown birds, kind of streaked underneath and kind of uniform brown above. And house finch just really has a plain face. Purple finch is much more contrasty and interesting in the face. Very similar bird. I would say maybe a little bit richer brown as well, but the basic pattern is the same: brown above and kind of streaked below. But if you look at the face pattern, is where you really hit pay dirt quickly. So it has this really dark auricular patch. This is the patch behind the eye with a nice bright white stripe above and below. So they're not necessarily as hard as you would think. And for most of us, purple finch is kind of a treat too, I would say. I mean, where I live, we get them briefly during migration. You'd be lucky to have it at your feeder, maybe a couple times a year.
Yep. So I think the major takeaway for house finch versus purple finch, whether it's a male, a female, a young bird, regardless, you're looking for bold patterning on the face in purple finch. The dark behind the eye, followed by white above and white below, is a really good field mark for purple finches versus house finches. And then just keeping in mind that purple finches are genuinely rare. So if you think you have one, always good to check that field guide, check your Merlin in your pocket, and make sure it matches up with the field guides that you have.
Will, I think you have one more for us. Is that right?
All right. Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so we're going to talk about the mourning dove, and we're not actually going to talk about how to tell this mourning dove apart from Eurasian collared dove, white-winged dove, rock pigeon, birds that look sort of similar. But one mistake that a lot of people make early on is thinking that a mourning dove, their song or call, sounds like a owl. So let's give mourning dove a listen. So this is a song that I'm on TikTok, and there's a lot of content that plays POV. You just woke up in 2007, you're a little kid running around, and you hear this sound. This is the song that everybody associates with childhood in suburban America. It takes you right back. But a lot of people hear that kind of low-pitched hooting sound, and they're like, I wonder if that's an owl, because they tend to sing, early in the morning when it might be a little bit dark out still. The closest one would be great horned owl. So we'll pull that up. Here's what a great horned owl sounds like. So quick comparison with mourning dove.
I mean, and to be fair, the voice is pretty dang similar. It's the cadence that's different, right?
Well, actually, listening to those side by side makes them sound more similar than I initially thought. But yeah, the great horned owl is going to be faster and it's going to be a little lower pitched. You got anything else for that, Caleb?
Strictly nocturnal too. You're not going to hear that owl doing that in the daytime almost ever, and you won't hear the dove doing it at night either. That's the other thing. But in that period, like you said, where you're waking up, this is the type of bird that I'll be sitting in bed and I'll hear it on the building, or in the tree right outside the house doing it. And yeah, I remember for years when I was a kid, I thought it had to be some kind of owl, and until you track it down, you don't know.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. We hope you learned something. And if you didn't, send this video to someone who you think could benefit from learning these 5 little quick tips that will level up your birding game. So please make sure to like, share, and subscribe as we climb up in terms of subscribers and views and listens and downloads and all those fun statistics that you don't care about, but we do. So yeah, thanks for watching, and make sure to tune in next week for more fun birding adventures.
See you next week, everybody.